Yo, people, welcome back to the channel. And welcome back to episode 15 of the Off to the Boundary Show. And we've got a lot to discuss, but also not a lot to discuss. So, yeah, we'll get into everything. But before we do, of course, I've got the main man himself, the one and only Manny.
Evening, Bert. How are you?
I'm good, Manny. I'm good. You?
Yeah, can't complain. Can't complain. Another week. Had a few things going on, and things seem to be getting stabilized. Of course, in this time, no news is good news, but always good to chat cricket. A nice change from the football, of course, which can get a bit boring at times, sometimes monotonous. I've realised we've got three football fans on the panel tonight, but this is a cricket show, so you can understand my sentiment.
Yeah, definitely. And then it was on last week. It's on again. It's probably one of the realest Arsenal fans. With Mr. Manny, it's Kenny.
How you doing, guys? It's actually a bit of a shame that the Ashes was sort of rushed through, where we've had we had a test match that traditionally is July's traditionally bad weather in Manchester. We had the forecast, and it's so a shame that Sky and the BBC forced the ECB to rush through the Ashes in order to push through their coverage of the 100. So that for me is a shame. But in terms of the cricket, there's still a lot to play for. England, for the way they've tried to approach the game, would like to sort of at least draw the series because it is a vindication of their style of play. And the Aussies have believed that that they want to actually win a series in England since Wars team in 2001. But again, loads of talking points. And the titles are very, very interesting, and they're discussion points that we're going to, put some more meat in the bones because there's viewpoints both here and in Australia where they have different views and very interesting views because, it's one of those things where it's subjective.
Indeed. And it's interesting you mentioned the weather at Old Trafford, Kenny. I'm sure you'll know of the news that I believe the next series won't feature any tests being played in the north. Now, I'm a little bit bemused as to how that schedule will work out because obviously, if you take a look at the south, you've got Lords and the Oval and also maybe Somerset and Taunton. I just wonder how they're going to figure out making everything based in the south. It could perhaps be due to the weather in the north that maybe they've decided not to have tests being played in the north.
I don't think so. I think the Rose Bowl in Southampton, they've been pushing for test status for a while. Because you remember this 2 years, the last Test Championship final was actually held at the Rose Bowl in Southampton. And the thing that's attractive for the Rose Bowl in Southampton, just like Old Trafford, they got hotel facilities on the ground. So, if you remember when England played the West Indies in 2020 and played Pakistan in 2020, both games, all the tests were played at Old Trafford and at the Rose Bowl, Southampton. Both of them have got affiliated hotels, which is virtually on the site, if not next door to the site. So, in terms of like the COVID situation, in terms of like everyone going to quarantine, it was beneficial. And let's not forget they held the World Test Championships between India and New Zealand. So it was a case where they were always going to award it. Because remember, let's not forget in 2013, so 2015, and in 2009 they awarded Cardiff, and I believe in 2013 Durham got the Riverside in Durham got an Ashes test as well. So it's one of those cases where invariably, in terms of Test series, Headley and Old Trafford has been the odd one out that seems to have missed out, although where Trent Bridge seems to be a favoured one because of the fact that it's a green deck. But all in all, it's all about pushing the Rose Bowl in.
Yeah, I mean, with the way things are going, we could possibly see a few grounds being rotated. And this isn't the first time that Old Trafford was chalked off for the Ashes. I do seem to remember in the early 2000s, England had a two-set Test series against Pakistan where where the Tests were played at Lord's and Old Trafford. But Old Trafford wasn't one of the 5 venues for that Test series against Wars Australia, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, 2001.
Yeah. And
Yeah, that's right.
I called it. I said a draw, so yeah, just putting it out there.
I think I also predicted a draw, but it was really, just unfortunate. But we are going to get to the meat of that. So, Hanno, start off.
Before we do, I got a nice picture here for you.
You
For you
sent that
guys.
in the group chat. Yeah, we don't need to see that again.
Yeah, the
For
the
Pete's
RIP.
sake.
But it's very pertinent what Hanno's done. It's pertinent because if you look at Australia, that's exactly what Australia are saying. If you go on Fox Cricket, if you've got access to Fox Cricket in Australia, there's a show in Australia called Hold the Back Page where they were saying something pretty in jest, obviously. It's pretty similar.
Yeah. But speaking of Australia and of course that, was it lucky or was it deserved? Was Charles Venby up himself? He says he think Australia would have presented it.
I'm not going to have my say over here. Oh, go ahead, Hannah. Sorry about that.
I think it's a bit of both. It's the deserved cause, of course, they won the first 2 tests, but it's lucky cause of the way England were playing in that 4th test match. Like Australia didn't have a sniff in that. It was all England. So I think it's a bit of both. So yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I'm going to have my say over here, and then obviously Kenny can come in. When it comes to a 5-test series, and obviously both Kenny and I will remember Ashes series in days gone by where certain test matches have been affected by the rain. And, all I can say it's an adage. You've got to take the rough with the smooth. So England went into this test knowing that they had to try to win. And they also knew that the weather forecast at Manchester was not going to be, a really great one. In fact, if memory serves me right, and it serves all of us right, England was celebrating, and quite rightly so, when they actually retained the Ashes in 2013 with that drawn test at Old Trafford. And of course, that was quite notable for Kevin Peterson's century in what I think was the I don't quite remember the innings, but that of course was a test where rain played spoil sport, and because it worked in England's favour, we were happy to celebrate. So we can't just suddenly develop a sour grapes mentality and curse the rain and do what Joe Root and Michael Vaughan have done and say, why can't we play a little bit longer? If England were going great guns, there's no doubt about that. But again, this is probably going to be one of those cases where Stokes's naivety in terms of making a declaration will come back to haunt him. He declared too early at Edgbaston, and he probably declared a little bit too late when it came to Old Trafford, because you've got to try to at least put yourself into a situation where you give yourself enough time to be able to attack the opposition. And just seeing the way England were able to attack Australia quite mercilessly in that 3rd innings, having them at about 100 odd for 4 at one stage before things ended up calming down a bit. You obviously want to try to think of how best you can try and give yourself a better chance of winning the game rather than just trying to bat them out the match. And with the rain playing spoil sport, England were always going to be asking for a little bit of trouble. So a quick declaration at about maybe 450 with a lead of 100 or 150 odd, if you want, would have at least given England a bit more time to, bowl at them. And England were looking at the prospect of even an innings win. So again, it's those fine margins. And of course, we are going to talk about this later on when we discuss whether Bazball is here to stay or not. Personally, I think it's here to stay, but it's also interesting to hear how Ben Stokes said, if I had to do it all again, if I had to do the same again, I would, my friend. There's no Fernando, but whatever. But again, sometimes as a captain, you've got to look back on everything and say, you know what? These are fine margins that can actually be the difference between winning and losing a major series. And in as much as England have been doing magnificently well with Bazball in terms of securing test victories after that dreadfully lean period near the end of Joe Root's captaincy, people remember the teams which won the big matches. And when Michael Vaughan began his tenure as England captain, he was also winning matches and series left, right, and centre. But if he hadn't have won the 2005 Ashes, then he wouldn't have much of a legacy of which to speak. So I think Ben Stokes will have to look back on his statements and his own tactics and say he has been a breath of fresh air in terms of being able to set some excellent fields and try and rotate his bowlers. But in terms of declarations, he should have done quite a bit better. And the fact that despite winning the toss on 4 occasions, he's only won one of those tests, with 2 of them being lost. I think that pretty much says it all. England had their chances, but I think Kenny will agree with me, and he said it. Australia won the big moments. They played smarter when it mattered. And so I don't believe there's too much of an element of luck with Australia retaining the Ashes here. England, we've got to be honest with ourselves as England fans.
So do you think maybe clubs need to declare a bit earlier in this fourth test when when they were batting? I think it maybe should have declared a bit earlier.
Yeah, I said that. I said that. I actually alluded to that by saying if they had declared with a lead of about 100 or maybe perhaps 125, 150, it would have given them at least more room to try and attack them. And maybe that would have been a sign of intent to really go at them, with the weather playing a factor. And we can bring Kenny over here. Maybe you'll have some similar views as I do.
Yeah, your views are very similar. You've got to remember, it's a 5-test series. It's a 5-test series, and whether England like it or not, the series doesn't lie. You've got 5 chances to try and get the best out of 5, and England weren't able to do that. Let's not forget, Ben Stokes did everything to try and win this series and give England every advantages. The pitch at Edgbaston was an absolute disgrace. It was absolute disgrace. A pudding pitch had nothing for the bowlers. Now, as much as England were able to play their attractive batting cricket, it also benefited Australia in the second innings, where they could bat all the way down. They had a long batting lineup, and Nathan Lyon's a very experienced batsman. So, in that respect, it kind of benefited Australia as well. There were key moments. Everyone's going to talk about the drop catches with Bairstow and the catches and the slips, but they do count. Australia held their nerve, but in the second test at Lords, Australia were the better team. Australia bowled better, and they batted a lot better. Bazball obviously was at his best, but let's not forget the contribution of Steve Smith in that test at Lords. He got a century. Let's not forget that as much as you say Australia were lucky, let's not forget Khawaja in the first test got a century. So that, in that respect, that helped. And let's not forget who was the man of the match in that first test. It was Khawaja. So if you look in the second test as well, the contribution runs from Smith, and also the bowling, Mitchell Starc, much maligned Mitchell Starc. Yes, he's very expensive. Unless Mitchell Marsh is either bowling fast or swinging the ball, he can be bowl like a bit of a drain. But at the big moments at Lords and Edgbaston, Australia the better side. Yes, England were leading on a while, but it doesn't mean anything. The third test, England were exemplary, and they need a bit of freshen up. Brought the pace of Mark Wood, and also they brought the accuracy of Chris Wokes. At Old Trafford, everyone knew this was going to be a situation where England the weather was always going to play a factor. The fact is, there
Yeah.
were mistakes made by both captains. Stokes, which was admiring, wanted Johnny Bairstow to get a century for man management issues because Johnny was very much maligned because of his wicket keeping and the fact that because he wasn't getting, the runs that they thought he should have got. I thought he didn't
And
too bad.
um,
They want he needed a century.
yeah, to add on that, one point they made while they were talking about it was raining is uh, they brought in Mohan Ali. Why did they stick with Best though? Why not bring folks? Because you would think they
It's
can
Hano.
bring back Ali to score those runs you need at the back end.
I think the
But
situation is Bairstow is Bazball. Bazball is Johnny Bairstow. Everyone identifies Ben Stokes with Bazball, but it's not. It was Johnny Bairstow's performances last season in the Test series against New Zealand, and obviously the one in South Africa, and also the one-off Test against India. It was Johnny Bairstow that in the chase he was the one who was attacking. He was the one who was getting England over the line. Remember those brilliant centuries, and obviously he had a good series in Australia. Then he got injured, but in terms of what England want to do, they are prepared to take big totals of over 300 plus or 350 plus. It's Johnny Bairstow's batting who's gotten him into it. Yes, Folkes is the better wicketkeeper, but in terms of like the balance of the sides, it was no different to what the balance England had in 2019 when Bairstow was again the wicketkeeper. So Bairstow is Bazball, and he showed he was his pedigree by getting that very very quick century as well. Because that's the thing with Johnny. When you look at Johnny, he's kind of improved his technique. Because you remember when Johnny used to always be bowled, either playing on or used to be bowled off stump or used to be LBW. He's actually corrected that now to the extent that I think he's maybe the 2020 and the one day white ball cricket's helped him. But in terms of like attacking teams and putting teams under pressure, especially when they're chasing, Johnny's vital to that brand of cricket. That's why folks want to start. But again, it's all interlinked with the injury to Jack Leach. If Jack Leach wasn't injured and Johnny wasn't injured, maybe you could have got folks in the team and Bairstow. But we've got to remember that because the premier spinner for the last 4 years has been like I said, Jack Leach. Moeen's just filling in.
Exactly.
yeah,
And you mentioned it in the last episode that Bairstow does provide that, ballast with the bat, as it were, which is why he's become so pivotal. And that's one of the reasons why we'll be discussing that later. England have so far named an unchanged team for the final test. I was pleasantly surprised, of course, with Moeen Ali coming up to number 3. And you were saying, Kenny, that he would be pretty much a walking wicket. But he ended up...
right in the first innings. I was right in the first innings.
Yeah. But... he actually, showed some decent application in terms of, getting a half century and also making sure that he got he got his landmark of 3,000 runs and 200 wickets, one of only 15 players worldwide to get that. And you could say that when you sort of take a look at how England started with Duckett going early, that 121-run partnership between Crawley and Ali really helped steady everything. Crawley was, of course, allowed to play his natural game. And then, of course, Root came in, a beautiful 200-odd run partnership between him and Crawley. And you could see the batsmen all making hay. And Hanno and I were talking about how when Australia were batting, many of the batsmen got some really good starts. Warner did look quite good. Quite unlucky to nick behind to Bairstow off Chris Wokes. Some pretty half centuries for Labuschagne and Mitchell Marsh. Smith and Head chipping in with some good scores of 40. Alex Carey and Mitchell Stark coming in at the end with some decent hits, but none of them really going on to get that big score. And that was something that would have, really hurt them. But again, England managed to get a lead of about 270 odd. 275 was their lead which they got. And maybe perhaps we were talking about how could they have perhaps declared a little bit earlier? I don't know. But it was just, of course, it was unfortunate that Bairstow just missed out on a century through no fault of his own. That was an absolute gem of an innings. It just goes to show when you've got James Anderson as your batting partner, all you can do is pray that he doesn't get himself out. Because he's, on a few occasions, he was the last man out as England lost tests by very, very fine margins. And now he ended up getting out and denying Bairstow 100.
Was there one in New Zealand? There was one in New Zealand this year.
Yeah, exactly. That was one. Yeah.
And there was one in Sri Lanka 9 years ago. Sri Lanka 9 years ago as well.
Yes, I remember that. That was actually the first series after Kevin Peterson was axed. And I think England drew the first test. They could have won that, but I believe when Stuart Broad took that final wicket, that was ruled out. And then, of course, there were 2 balls left. And off the second to last ball of the day in the second test, Anderson ended up being, caught out. And that was an absolute heartbreaker. So, but anyway, the question here again, Kenny, is that when England lost their 7th wicket, or their 5th wicket, actually, they were 437. They had 437 on the board, a lead of 120. And then, of course, that swelled to 474 by the time they lost their 6th wicket, which was Harry Brook. I just wonder, though, should they have declared earlier and at least given themselves a chance of attacking Australia a lot more? Because they did really well in the first innings, preventing their batsmen from really kicking on to getting some big scores, and they broke some partnerships really well. Would they look back on that second innings and say, feasting on that pitch and getting all those runs probably hurt them in the end?
Well, they could because of the fact that, in hindsight, it's a great thing. But let's not forget, they were scoring those runs pretty quickly.
Oh yeah,
it was not a case of them, like blocking, and grinding Australia out. They were playing attacking cricket, and they were getting a lot of boundaries. And Bairstow, in particular, was scoring quickly. So if you're scoring quickly, then a declaration, like I said, it does. Time isn't really runs isn't an essence. But if you say if you're batting like an old someone like Rory Burns would bat slowly, or Jeffrey Boycott or Chris Tavare, then yes, you've got to declare early. But England was scoring their runs quickly. Let's not forget that Australia were put in at the right time. England did make a couple of inroads at the end of like Friday's play. They did get the openers out. Let's not forget they did make inroads, and they got 4 wickets. And it was only with the rain where they were able to get Labuschagne out. So that is an ample time for them to get inroads. So you can talk about, could they have declared early? Yes, they could. But let's not forget, Ben Stokes gave Australia a very generous declaration. Look what happened when he gave a very dangerous. He brought Australia into the series. He could have, by rights, battered Australia out because they were scoring quickly, and we know that if it given another hour, they would have probably got up to 450 or even 500 in the first day's play. So, it's hit and miss. In hindsight, it's a great thing in terms of cricket, but with this England side, they do score quickly. So I don't think it was an issue. And let's not forget, when they did have that hour and a bit, I think 90 minutes on Saturday, they only got 1 wicket. So with the way Australia were playing, the way the confidence that Australia had at the time during that test wasn't high as well. England only got themselves to blame because Australia's team selection helped England. Remember last time I said that under no circumstances must go without a spinner. They went without a spinner. And not only did they went and got part-time spinners, and they got slogged all over the place. Labuschagne didn't make any in. Neither did Travis Head. But the fact is, Australia had played into England's hands because without a spinner like even Todd Murphy or Nathan Lyon, the bowlers don't get rest. So bowlers ended up getting over bowled, and that's the whole situation. bowling. It was basically bad bowling. As Ian Chappell used to say, I don't give Phils for bad bowling, and it was poor bowling. I mean, come on. It's meant to be a test match, but you've got everyone out on the boundary. You've got away with it, Edgbaston. To do it at Old Trafford was criminal. England would look at the way Johnny Bairstow was, in that the second innings, in the first innings when he was getting runs on buys.
Yep.
Because the split the field was too, like spread out. He was only killing singles.
Exactly.
Australia gave him enough chances to put them away. But at the end of the day, it's Test cricket. Australia bat all the way down. Yes, there is a amount of confidence, but again, you've got 4 wickets. You've got Lavish on that, but you still had Green. And Green, who's is a competent batsman, got a century. Mitchell Marsh, on his day can play. Well, he got a century last year, and you had Kerry to come in. It's not a given that that you would have won the Test match, given that. But with time, I suppose you could. But for all we know, Australia could have posted a challenging title for England. We just don't know. But the fact is, if you're 2-0 down in the Test series, it's very difficult to win the series when you're 2-0 down. Doesn't mean it was any series. 2-0 is basically like the last rights in any 5-match series, and England were always behind the 8, and that's why they didn't retain the Ashes, because they didn't go to Old Trafford, going to Headingley 1-1. They went into Headingley 2-0. It's hard to claw it back.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and of course,
exactly.
So, not much else can be added to that. I mean, what about the next topic, Hannah? Go ahead.
Let's go to comments. Is it right man to lead? The money you put this in. You go.
My answer is yes, and I'm going to hand the floor to Kenny. Let him let him talk about it, and I'll just add my views at the end. Go ahead, Kenny.
Well, the thing about Cummings is that it's very difficult for a bowler, in my opinion, to be a captain. Imran Khan did it Imran Khan's done it. I know Courtney Walsh did it for the West Indies as well. I understand, but I just think in terms of Cummings, he's making a lot of mistakes, which he's got away with. His field placings in the first Test were just awful. He basically gave England 398 runs. He basically gave them those runs because simple reason, he didn't put them under pressure. It was very, very defensive fields. England made hay. Thankfully, Usman Khawaja got a century, and thankfully, he managed to get a 50 as well in the second innings, which gave him the platform to win the game. But it was made mistakes. His captaincy in the second Test, I liked very much. Third Test, I thought his captaincy was ordinary. His mistrust of Murphy was basically gave England the game. And he basically tied out his bowlers, especially his fast bowlers, not given like I said. Another thing as well, he didn't help bowling much because the way his fields were set, it basically enabled England to bat out their crease and negate bowling. Now, if he had the same fields he had in the last Test series against Australia, then Boland would have been able to put England under pressure with that off stump line, off stump, middle stump line. Because you look at the England bowlers, some of their bowlers are not too dissimilar to Boland's, but they had the support of their captain. They had the fields where they could put on Australia under pressure. They weren't fielding under the boundary. So what was happening is that Australian batsmen like Smith had to stay in the crease for most of the time when they batting against Wokes. Obviously, in the second innings when it was a free-for-all, Bairstow came to stumps. But what's happening is that Wokes got protection from Bairstow with the fields, so he's able to bowl that line because Wokes bowls the kind of the off stump, middle stump line, and he tries to swing the ball outside off stump and gets his move from there off the seam. Boland's not too dissimilar, so in essence, he killed Boland. He killed Boland with his fields because, as we know, Boland doesn't swing the ball like a Cummins. He doesn't swing the ball like a Stark. He doesn't swing the ball like where Hazelwood's capable of doing. Or Hazelwood's more of a line length seam bowler. So in that respect, that didn't help Cummins. His handling of Murphy was poor, ordinary as well. Ordinary. Didn't give him the feels he wants, and then panicked because he thought, "Oh no, he's going to go for a lot of runs. I can't afford to do it." But again, the total that Australia posted to England was defendable. It was winnable. He should have taken a risk, but he didn't. So in that respect, I'm not. Oh, and let's not talk about his decision not to play him in Old Trafford. Let's not talk about the fields as well. He gave England 500 over 570 something runs. It's his field placings. Let's not. I repeat, Bairstow was running off the byes. He was basically nicking singles and nicking byes of Anderson to get himself on strike. It wasn't, and he was doing it repeatedly. And Cummins didn't react. So I have to say, is he the right man to as captain Australia? I think he's more a PI captain personally, but I understand why you can't you can't sack him because he won the Ashes in Australia. Emphatically, he's a World Test champion. But the problem is that the candidates to take over Cummins, Travis Head has been captain of South Australia for about the last 9 years. They've won nothing. Nothing. Kawaja's too old. Although he's doing a very good job at Queensland. Lavishane, I don't see him getting any captaincy responsibility for stateside for Australia. David Warner's a no-no. Steve Smith doesn't commit to long series. Anytime Steve Smith can say, "Well, yeah, I'm retiring," he takes it one series at a time. But in essence, because of what happened with, even though I think that he's probably he should be catching the Australian side, he won't be catching the Australian side because the reason is that his age plus what happened in South Africa. But in terms of Cummins as a captain, I think the pressure's getting to him. But it's understandable because let's not forget he's had a traumatic experience with losing his mum. Remember, he had to miss a few games
exactly.
because in India because of what happened with his mum. So I do understand that. But at the moment, his captaincy is very ordinary. It's not impressing me at all. It's killing his bowlers, his field places, and it's basically made Scott Boland redundant. I repeat, with a bowler like Scott Boland, you've got to have attacking fields. You can't have defensive fields because you might as well, because England were able to spat outside the crease and negate the movement.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, but it's you can blame Cummins, you can blame Boland all you like and say that he's a flash in the pan, but your captain's got to help you, and his captain didn't help him.
Absolutely agree. And yeah, the reason why I said he is the right person to lead Australia, I think I should rephrase that. I think for the reasons that you've mentioned and the reasons I completely agree with, he is the only person who can lead Australia. Because, I mean, I take a look at Steve Smith and I see a guy who still doesn't even realize just how lucky he is to be given the second chance to be a part of that leadership group, while David Warner has pretty much been, cast aside like last night sometime in Green Curry.
Class issue with David Warner. David Warner comes from David Warner comes like the equivalent of a housing estate, an estate kid. We have estates in North London, in inner parts of the country. How council has estates. He had the equivalent in west side of Sydney. That's why I think people in Australia look down on him. They're happy for him to be that. bully boy. But when it's not convenient, it's his behaviour. But if he didn't come from like a working class family, do you think he'd be treated like this? Would he be demonised by everyone in cricket?
Yeah, I was sort of going on to that, and we've been speaking about this. I completely agree with you, and I don't. In as much as Smith has still been Australia's best batsman even during this phase when he's come back into the team, I still don't really see people having that much goodwill with him to sort of let him have the captaincy again. Of course, he did fill in for Cummins when he had to leave India to take care of his mum, and obviously that was a traumatic thing. Now, back to Cummins, I'd agree with you completely. He doesn't strike me as being that sort of an attacking captain who'd be willing to really put pressure on the opposition. He's extremely defensive with regard to his field placings, and he doesn't really strike me as that sort of a person who can, really take the game by the throat when it matters and say, you know what, we need to try and make a change over here. He has bowled well for the most part, and I believe he is still one of the leading wicket takers in the series. And I suppose you could say that the success that he's earned with Australia has been in spite of his captaincy and really more down to his own performances and also the performances of people around him. But again, let's not forget, he came into the job after that whole kerfluffle with Tim Payne, who started off well, but also went off the boil, especially in the home test series against India. He should have won the Ashes series when Australia toured England last and ended up drawing that. And then, of course, with Cummins coming in after that crisis and steering the ship, he's done a decent job, and there doesn't seem to be anyone else who can take that sort of a responsibility. But tactically, I completely agree. And we're having the same issue right now, mind you, with the likes of Ricky Ponting when he became captain. Instead of taking tactical advice from Adam Gilchrist, it would be Shane Warne, God rest his soul, who was doing a lot of work with the field placings and bowling changes, running the show and literally trying to make everything happen. And when Australia lost, there was some talk about how Warney should have been the captain. I was never in favour of that because Warney never struck me as the type of serious person who could, leave his wild behaviour behind and commit to captaining the team.
Behind the scenes, Warney has been credited for having a very, very good cricketing brain. And it was always a case where, obviously he was a vice captain under Stephen Waugh, obviously after Mike Taylor resigned. So he was always had some leadership positions. But obviously he was off the field, like all the PR thing that, counting against him. Obviously the betting, the information, the money for picture information with Mark Ward didn't help him, and obviously the sex pest telephone calls to a South African nurse in this country didn't help him. So that's the thing. But you are right. You always thought that Ricky Ponting was white-anted during the 2005 series, but Ponting was a good captain because he went on that big record, undefeated. Plus, he's won a few World Cups as well. And let's not forget the way Australia came back in the Ashes series 06, 07. But I hear you. But when I look at Patrick Cummins, obviously he's only just got the job 5 minutes, but his captaincy could have gone the other way, and that could have been costly. If Australia are the ones that are 2-1 down, the people like the Ian Chappells, ex-captains, Alan Balders, Ricky Ponting. Ricky Ponting kept on talking about if you listen to commentary in the UK, I don't know if you get the same feed from Sky Sports where you both in the world, but Ricky Ponting was always talking about those field placings.
Oh, we get Sky Sports here. We get Sky Sports. Well,
if you get Sky Sports, you would have had the Ricky Ponting keep on banging the drum of Cummins' field placings, and that could have been costly. It was definitely costly for most of the first test match. It definitely was costly at Headley and Old Trafford. There's no doubt about that.
Which begs the question: why didn't he seek Steve Smith's advice as his deputy?
Again, there was when it was going wrong. Steve Smith was the one who was captaincy. But the initial decisions are Cummins' decisions. But when England Cummins reacted to England piling those runs. He reacted not very well, but he reacted. There's nothing innovate. There's no innovation in his terms of captaincy. Now, when you look at Steve Smith, there was a bit of imagination in terms of his captaincy. You've got the feeling that with Michael Clarke as well, there was imagination. Obviously, England, the most imaginative captain England's ever had for me was Mike Gatting. You know what I mean?
I think you'll remember the reverse sweep in the 1987 World Cup.
What I'm trying to say is Cummins and Smith are reactors. It was like as soon as they got on these shores, they went right into defensive. Because of how England played in Pakistan and how England played last season against New Zealand and South Africa. He completely set defensive fields. Rather than like I said, give his bowlers a chance of getting wickets. You look at England. Why do you think England looked like the better bowler in that thing? It was because Ben Stokes' fields and the way the bowlers bowled in that sort of corridor put Australian bowlers under a batsman under pressure where they had to work for their runs. England didn't have to work for their runs.
We know all of that. Exactly. Three slips in the gully. If you nick, you're gone.
Yeah. Did England work for their runs at Edgbaston, Old Trafford, at Headley? You tell me.
No, not really. Not really. So I think the verdict here is that, he's the only person who can captain the team. But tactically, I completely agree. He doesn't have the best cricketing brain. But when it comes to leading a team through a crisis situation, I think... the way he was able to guide the team home along with Nathan Lyon at Edgbaston, I think that should be enough to give him some credit in the bank, at least for the series, and then he will have a review over everything. But I'll tell you what, I think Nathan Lyon's absence has really hurt them, you would say.
Well, yeah, it has helped them, but it has helped them, and it would have, but it's still breaking over cracks. Nathan Lyon was playing in the first test when he set that defensive field. And it was only Nathan Lyon's cricketing and bowling know-how which actually kept the runs down. If Nathan Lyon weren't playing in the first test, England probably would have got 500 with the fields that Cummins has been setting. But again, It's all subjective. One thing Cummins has got in his favour is he's got Pakistan and the West Indies, and they're not going to pose any problems for Australia.
You never know. I think the way Shaheen Afridi and company are bowling, they could pose some problems. I think you remember 1990 when Pakistan came to Australia. Wasim Akram led that attack quite superbly.
Yeah, but this Pakistan got smashed to pieces by both England and Australia in their own conditions. They're all favourable conditions that conduce to spin, dust bowls, and they got smashed to pieces on flat wickets. I can see something more. I think it's going to be very embarrassing for Pakistan, and we know it's going to be embarrassing for the West Indies. So the next cabinet rank for Cummins is going to be a home test series against Australia and England. But England are pathetic whenever they go to Australia. They're pathetic.
Oh yes,
yeah.
The days of the sprinkler dance are long gone.
Yeah, I agree with it. Look, if we look at that team for Australia, there's not really anyone else you can choose. So that is, they don't have anyone else. This one, there isn't really anyone coming through the ranks. Can I mention?
Not really. Do you remember Will Petovsky? He was the next kind of cabaret rat, but he had a couple of head injuries where he got hit in the helmet a couple of times, and now he's taking an extended break from cricket for mental health reasons. And they've already tried Renshaw, who is basically like a plodder, and Harris is another one who they're given chances and he hasn't performed. And I suppose Joe Burns is too old. So really and truly, I can't see. There's going to be a raft of retirements in all departments in about the next 3 or 4 years in Australian cricket. Marsh is going to go. Stark's going to go. Hazelwood's not going to go on for longer. Nash from Nine is not going to be around for
But,
longer. We've got
but
Warner's going to
we
go.
don't
Walsh is
that
going to go.
Australian, but it's almost the same for England.
Yeah, to an
Except
extent.
because Anderson,
Mm.
Broad, Wood, to a certain extent. How old Stokes? How old is he?
It's not.
He's also
It's not. Stokes. I don't think age. Stokes is about 32, 33, but his
yeah,
body is completely gone. Like
yeah.
Flintoff's around the same kind of age, where the knee went. Flintoff's knee went in
Bester too.
at the same age
I
back
think
30 years ago.
same with Bester. So I think
Yeah.
in 4 years' time, when we're sitting here, and it's the next series in England, I think there's a um, all new U11, in my opinion. Um,
Definitely.
I
Don't
think.
be surprised if Zach Crawley's the captain in 4 years' time.
Oh,
No, but we should see Joe Root back in 4 years' time because look, he's only 32. He's got some good years left in him. Or
yeah,
actually, he could very well end up overtaking Sachin Tendulkar as the leading run scorer
Well,
in Test cricket. The way he's still
if he
going.
only plays Test cricket, then he's got a future. But if he's going to try and get back in a one-day side, no.
yeah.
I actually
Well,
believe,
Joe,
Kenny, that this World Cup could very well be Joe Root's last as a one-day player because if, as you say, he
He's
could want to
in the
extend his
squad
Test
though.
career,
He was dropped from the one-day squad though, wasn't he? He's been dropped from the one-day squad, wasn't he? Under Morgan, towards the end of Morgan's tenure, Joe Root was dropped, wasn't he?
Memory serves me right. I think he might have been, yeah, but he still was a part of the World Cup winning squad a few years ago. He could be recalled, I think.
Yeah, but in terms of the 50-over World Cup, is this going to be the last 50-over World Cup we're going to see? Because there's no commitment to a World Cup in 2027 because one of the formats they look at the drop is either going to be Test cricket, which they dare not drop, so it's 50 overs because T20 is the payday because you look at it, I don't see many discussions going on about the 2027 World Cup or the 2031. So again, that's another discussion, that's another debate. But
yeah, he
you
does
know what I
play
mean?
at the moment. He does play ODI.
Mm.
Yeah, Canada women are turning up the Women's World Cup. But let's move on to Mr. Well, not Mr. Legend, Mr. Captain. No, Mr. Fantastic. Jimmy Anderson
Oh,
played at his ground. Just didn't look at it. I think it might be time.
You know, the sad part about Anderson is that when you consider how well he was bowling for England in the lead up to this Ashes series, it's just sad how, he hasn't been effective. I don't know whether it's a case of the pressure or the age getting to him, or maybe both. It could certainly be said that he was quite unlucky to miss out on bowling at Headingley because that wicket was perhaps tailor-made for him. But in the end, when you take a look at the way Mark Wood and company were able to bowl so magnificently and ensure that result, it was perhaps in hindsight the right decision. I get the feel, obviously, for a fast bowler or somewhat fastish medium to be able to maintain the career that he's had has been an absolutely magnificent effort. But then, time catches up with everyone, no matter how good you are. Of course, Kenny will remember only too well how Courtney Walsh and Curtly Ambrose were still able to do great things for the West Indies well into their 30s. And one of the reasons why Ambrose retired 2 tests short of what would have been his 100th test, he didn't even bother to go to the tour to Australia because he didn't want to continue doing it anymore, was because he was sick and tired of having him and Courtney doing most of the work and no real youngsters willing to step up to the plate and make themselves counted. So not fast bowlers can't go on forever. And Courtney Walsh did go on for a bit. He wanted to get the world record, which he did from Kapil Dev, and he ended up making history by being the first bowler to get 500 Test wickets. But by the time a fast bowler retires, his body's going to be in bits. And never mind the fact that Kenny, you were talking about how Mark Wood has been injured so often. We've said, you and I, that the faster you bowl, the more likely you are to get an injury. And in as much as Anderson's bowling style has meant that he hasn't had too many injuries, once you get to a certain age, and especially given how long he's been bowling for the best part of more than 20 years, it does tend to catch up with you. And Michael Vaughan went on record as saying that this sentimental decision to give Anderson a final home test at his home ground so that the commentators could say, bowling from the James Anderson end, James Anderson, it probably could have cost them. It's difficult because he was, of course, the most economical of the bowlers. In the second innings, he had an economy rate of 1.76, and in the first innings, his economy rate was again the best at 2.55, easily better. But he was in the side to mainly take wickets. There is a part of me, though, that feels that maybe if he was sort of expected to, because Kenny, you were talking about the wobble seam in the last episode we had. There's a part of me that thinks that if he were to sort of be demoted to a first or second change bowler who could now just tidy up a little bit and stop the flow of runs, maybe that would be where his role lies. Because given the responsibility of the new ball, when he was expected to do quite well, he just wasn't able to get that penetration. But maybe a more reduced role could be the best thing for him because, I mean, he's been a magnificent servant to English cricket, and he doesn't deserve to end his career with people making some barbs about his age or whether or not he's worthy of being selected. And especially for Vaughan to, make that quip about him, it would have hurt him because let's not forget, Vaughan captained Anderson during the early part of Anderson's career.
Not very well. Jimmy has gone on record to say that the captain that he thought Michael Vaughan's captaincy regarding him and his handling of him was very poor, if not ordinary. He was never a big fan of Michael Vaughan's captaincy. He was a massive fan of Nasser Hussain's captaincy, believe it or not, and he's a massive fan of Strauss and Cook. Cook's is one of his best friends in cricket. But Michael Vaughan was never. If you look at Michael Vaughan, I think he's got a second chance, and I think if I was him, I'd take it because there's a lot of snidey little comments that he seems to come out of his mouth online and in general, and he needs to sort of rein it in because he nearly lost him his job. His loose tongue, his stupidity. You know what I mean? But when you start Michael Vaughan is one of the best pundits I've heard on cricket, but sometimes there can be a kind of how would I call it, a horrible snidey side to some of his comments. But in terms of Jimmy Anderson, I can understand Michael Vaughan being ruthless, but then again, Michael Vaughan spends a lot of time in Australia with Fox Cricket, so Australians are very matter of fact, blunt people, so that would have rubbed off from Michael Vaughan, and Michael Vaughan's always admired the way Australians play the cricket. But in terms of Jimmy, it's a shame because I think Jimmy would have liked to have used his series to get to at least up to 700 wickets, which would have been a phenomenon for a fast bowler. But Jimmy's, as I said before, Jimmy's in the team to take wickets, and he hasn't taken wickets. He's kept the score line down, but again, he hasn't taken wickets. But again, you've got to think about it. Wokes is actually been bowling well, and he's been a thorn in the Aussie side. And Mike Wood's pace, it's where do you fit Jimmy in? You have Jimmy in. I think you should give him a new ball, but let's face it, the bowler who's made more of penetration than new ball is Stuart Broad. But the thing with Jimmy is that you look at Broad and Jimmy, their wickets tend to be on English pitches, so the argument to keep Jimmy in the team is great because he knows it considers inside out. A lot of the pitches in England were made for him. But then again, Mr. I Love Bazball, Ben Stokes, with the wickets that he's chosen, have they helped Jimmy? let's be honest.
Yeah.
That ain't help Jimmy. Those wickets. He wants flat, fast deck wickets. He was asking for. He needed at least 8 fast bowlers. What's that trying to tell you? On a flat, fast pitch, fast bowlers, generally extreme pace, gets the batsman hopping around and gets them staying in their creases instead of coming forward. So they're playing back foot shots. Jimmy bowls a fully length in order to extract either the wobble seam, the in swinger or the out swinger, and to get the edges. You know what I mean? So again, I'm not blaming. I'm you know, Jim. As much as Jimmy's
Um,
bowler we've ever had, has the pitches helped Jimmy? I don't think so. I'm not making excuses for Jimmy. I'm just stating facts. Ben Stokes asked for fast, flat wickets.
yeah, true. Broad definitely won't play in the World Cup. Definitely not. I think you said it there perfectly. Look, that's the one problem if you want to continue to play till you that age, because most people won't remember the good times. They will always have that recent memory in their mind. Um, and unless you end your career on high and good, most likely after you retire, most people are going to remember the bad for a while, and then of course later on the good. Um, but yeah, I think he might retire after the series. So yeah, uh, I don't know, money. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, we're probably going to talk a little bit more about England's 11, and I think we'll talk a bit more about that. But let's go to the next topic, which is going to be quite interesting indeed.
Yeah, Bazball. Entertainment over winning. No, I'm going to have myself. Look, I think basketball is good, but there's a fine line between in basketball being good and basketball being bad. So if basketball is being good, you win games and you entertaining the crowd. But when it's bad, it's it's that one thing that almost irritating at all at some
Mm,
times. Like they keep bringing it up. The fine line is with basketball. You gotta use it at the right times. You
mm,
can't use it when you 100 for 4 or 200 for 6 or 200 for 7. You can't use it then. So you need to pick a moment when to use basketball. If we look at the way they played at Lords, the England's batsmen, they almost went ultra attack against that short ball, and that's one of the biggest problems why they lost that match. Because you look Harry Brook, why is he playing that type of shot? Um, same same with Duckett and Crawley almost. Why are you going so extra attacking? So that's mine. I don't know what about you guys.
Yeah, I'm going to actually sort of chime in here and say this. I alluded to this in at the beginning of the show, or actually, I think when we were backstage. I think maybe I don't remember, but when you take a look at England's pitiful record in tests during the last days of Joe Root's captaincy, and how we've started under Ben Stokes by winning all these tests left, right, and centre, you know, it's sort of biblical. It's like you go through these years of famine and then you have plenty. It's as if you have to say, you got to have more of that. We need to have some more of that. And we're not going to complain how it happens as long as it happens. And it has been in many ways a breath of fresh air. And I think the reason why people have critiqued the defeats under Stokes is because some of those defeats could very easily have been victories. Such has been the fine margins. It is quite easy to say, you know, some. I mean, you said it perfectly, Hannah. You have to know when to apply that and when not to apply that. But I think Kenny also said something last week. The Bazball has been used by teams in days gone by. And what we're basically seeing right now with England is just old wine in a new bottle. And that bottle being in the shape of Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes. Two Kiwis, of course. But, I would say this. In as much as it is correct to say that we need to know when to have these moments, I also don't really like what Stokes said about the fact that you want to leave a legacy of having entertained the crowds, and in addition to winning games, because at the end of the day, both Kenny and I, as Arsenal fans, will tell you that. You introduced us as both a couple of realist Arsenal fans. We can tell you right now that, in as much as it may be nice to be, entertained as fans, if you don't win anything, it isn't really that effective. It can be rather futile. And we both experienced the best of Arsene Wenger's time at Arsenal. We experienced the worst of his time at Arsenal, especially, namely in this case, the time at the Emirates when we couldn't even buy a league title win and had a few FA Cups to sort of grace the trophy cabinet of the Emirates. But coming back to the cricket right now, obviously we can't allow ourselves to blow the whole thing out of proportion by saying that Bazball is dead and buried, because look, this is the first Ashes series that we've played, and we've actually looked like we looked like competing in certain points. We just played a little bit of mindless cricket at times, which cost us the big moments. And I think Kenny would agree that because Australia won the big moments, they deserve to retain the urn. But given that it's still quite recent, we are still on a bit of a learning curve. And I'll tell you what, if we can just take the lessons that we've learned from this series and say, you know what, there comes a time and a place when we could play a certain way. There's a time and a place where we can't. And this segues into the idea of how to play short pitch bowling. That is one lesson that we are going to have to take going forward. It's funny though, because in the first two tests, Australia were able to pepper us with the short ball, and we ended up suffering. But I think a combination of that ridiculous short pitch bowling strategy, but also overworking the fast bowlers at Old Trafford and maybe at Headingley, ended up giving us these runs, and we could have been in a position to square the series going into the Oval. So I wonder if we've learned our lessons on how to play it and how to leave it, or has it just been a case of Australia getting a little bit too complacent or too lazy, or as you would probably say in Pat Cummins' case, just not being able to back up that aggressive bowling with some aggressive field placings? Maybe it's a bit of everything. What would you say to that, Kenny?
Well, think about it. It's talking about Bazball as well, entertainment and winning. Let's not forget, England won playing that way last year. They beat the world champions, when the world champions, New Zealand, got into winning positions. They got into winning positions. Let's not forget, New Zealand, if you look at all three of those test matches, New Zealand were kicking it. New Zealand could have won 3-0. Remember, they got early wickets in those run chases. They put on some really big scores. I think was it Mitchell last year? I think it got a couple. His dad's a rugby coach. His dad's a rugby coach. I think it's
you
Mitchell,
might be talking about. Yeah, you might be talking about John Mitchell, who was a rugby coach, and his son might be Darryl.
His son Mitchell. Mitchell had a good series last year where he scored the most runs out of both sides. New Zealand were in great position to win those matches, but England chased it down. A lot of it was down to Johnny Bairstow. So they were entertaining and they were winning. Let's not forget that they won the one-off test, which was a continuation of the previous years when India left because of COVID. They won playing that way against, at the time, what a lot of people still believe is the best test team in the world. A lot of people still think India are the best team in the world. They beat India. And let's not forget, India were 2-1 up in that series. Obviously, it was a 2-year series because of what happened with COVID. And let's not forget how they played against in Pakistan playing that way. So it is winning. But I think what a lot of people say, and I get it, it's the Ashes. Because Australia are world champions, a lot of people think they're the best team in the world. Can they play that entertaining way and win? Well, that's shown that Australia have one kind of the big moments in those first two tests. So I put winning. Winning has got to always come first. I understand where Ben Stokes has come from. I fully respect Barry McCallum because Barry McCallum's been trying to play that way since 2014, where don't worry about coming out of team, don't worry about you losing a wicket, just play. And I get that, but the fact is, had England been Stokes not made errors in terms of certain what people might say declarations and maybe a few captures might have dropped, it could have gone either way. The fact is that winning has to come first because I think winning is entertaining. Let's not forget when the West Indies were at their best that everyone wanted to play the West Indies. Test grounds around the world were packed to watch the West Indies because they're winners. They're the best team in the world, and they're winners. They've seen the best players at the top of their form.
Oh yes.
Grounds. That's why test grounds in this country were filled when the West Indies came over in the 70s and 80s and the 90s. But West Indies are not winners, so teams try to swerve playing the West Indies because they know that they don't bring the crowds in. Just like Australia, when they're winning, bring the crowds in. So winning is entertaining, and it puts bums on seats, and it keeps people going. But what there is a school of thought that Test cricket isn't entertaining, and T20 is the more entertaining game. So you have to bring what's good in T20 into Test cricket. But one thing that could help Test cricket is the over rates. We're not getting 90 overs a day because people time taken with injuries, alleged or drinks breaks. That don't help. But as I was saying before, Bazball can be winning cricket. But we have to accept that certain players are never going to play for England again. Hamid will never play for England again because he can't. Burns won't play for England again. Sibley won't play for England. So Bazball is great for an entertainment animal, and it has proved to be winning cricket previously. But the development of English players coming through, especially your test, if you're an opener in 4-day cricket or Test cricket, you're taught to value your wicket. Well, I don't see Bazball as a way of valuing your wicket, especially when you're having to bat outside your crease, hit the ball in the air. I think a lot of I don't for the detriment of opening batsmen. Is it good or bad? We have to wait and see. But certain players won't be able to play for England. So in a way, it's good for the player, like Duckett's, who doesn't know how to leave a ball. He'll get found out in Australia, by the way, if he tries that. Trust me. But anyway, that's where I've got a bit of a problem with Bazball. But let's not forget, the Ashes for a lot of people is the be all and end all of everything. But let's not forget, England won playing that way, and they won well playing that way. So it's probably going to be the way to go as long as Ben Stokes is catching. But there has to, as Hanno says, there has to be the right time to play like that. There has to be a situation where you do have to value your wicket, earn the right to play Bazball by valuing your wicket, and then putting the opposition under pressure. What England try to do is that from the first ball, they're trying to put the opposition under pressure, which it works on flat pieces, and sometimes it don't work.
Exactly. And I think, you and I can both agree that we can't just throw the Bazball baby out with the bathwater. But that segues into another issue. You were talking about valuing your wickets, and I think it's about the issue of short pitch bowling. I did mention before coming to you, Kenny, that the short ball was used quite effectively by the Australians in the first two tests when they were able to bounce us out. Many a time, our batsmen were just caught playing some rather stupid shots and gave our wickets away. But in the third and fourth tests, we were able to, sort of counter that quite well and actually use that to our advantage. And I don't know if necessarily we've learned how to play short pitch bowling overnight. I don't really think so. But
Has England ever played short pitch bowling? England and Australia have always had a problem with short pitch bowling. We're talking going back 50 years. let's not forget,
Yeah.
West Indies didn't just put England to the sword; they put the Australians to the sword.
Oh yeah.
That's why England and Australia got together and reduced the amount of bouncers within an over. Pakistan didn't complain. India didn't complain. South Africa didn't complain, even though they were banned for a long time. It was England and Australia who had a problem with the West Indies armory.
Oh yeah. But
Look, if you look
also,
at,
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
even you
No,
look
go
at it
ahead, go
now,
ahead.
to this day, the Australians still struggle with fast bowling. When
True.
they face a bowler who bowls 95 miles an hour, they do not like it. They don't like it. They like to give it when they had Brett Lee and Sean Tate, but when it came at them, they don't fancy it. And
No,
that's being
they
honest.
didn't.
We're going back to Bodyline series. The Australians don't like it up them. And let's not forget how the West Indies did to them, both home and away.
Oh
Australians
yeah.
should not cope, but England are not much better either with fast bowling. They don't like fast bowling. If it wasn't
Yeah.
the
But
West
I
Indies,
mean,
it was the Indians and all the South Africans. In
yeah, there have
Australia,
been some.
with
Yeah.
genuine, good fast bowling.
Yeah, but one thing which I do remember very well is that there have been some players who have been exceptions. Obviously, as England fans, and you obviously will have watched cricket for a longer period than I have, you'll remember with a nice South African connection from the Cape Province, which will please Hanno, a certain Alan Joseph Lamb, who was born in Langebanweg in the Cape Province, came, of course, to England to play for Northamptonshire. Stood about 5'8", so he was about my height, maybe marginally taller, I would say. But Ian Botham rates him as probably the bravest batsman he's ever seen. And on 6 occasions, this little guy from South Africa who came and played for us scored centuries against that fearsome West Indies attack. And
Because
he was,
he was a good back foot player, and
yeah,
he was a ferocious cutter. He's
yeah.
ferocious with his square cuts.
Exactly. And there's another school of thought from Bob Simpson, who was able to coach Steve Waugh to becoming a better player of short pitch bowling. And that also helped him, become the best batsman in the world sometime in the late 90s, I think. Because in the early part of Steve Waugh's career, he was technically a lot too side on with his stance. So whenever the ball would come at him rather quickly, he wouldn't have time to react. So Simpson taught him to open up his stance a little bit more. And also, when he would watch the ball, he'd have to watch it right out of the bowler's hand, which would give him a little bit more time to sort of see the flight of the ball, the direction of the ball, how it would bounce, and then sort of adapt immediately, whether it was using trigger movements or what have you, and then just use his stance to try to get the ball away and then just survive that delivery to fight again. And he ended up doing quite well. So maybe there is some sort of a science to countering the short ball, knowing when to leave it, but also being able to apply that kind of, thinking, whether it's keenly watching the ball, opening up your stance and using these trigger movements to try to counter that technique. Do you think such tactics could be used, perhaps? And maybe could that lead to solving of that problem?
It could be, but I think if you think of Mark Wood's bowling, and you think of the England's bowling now getting a bit short pitch bowling, nine out of 10 times, because there's only what tends to get the bowler out is when it's not so much when it's at the body, it's when they're not having enough time to get on the front foot. With the fast bowling, and I think that's been the case for both England and Australia. They've both been hopping around. Like normally, a lot of both kind of batsmen like to get on that front foot. Lavishane likes to get on the front foot. Because if you look at a lot of one-day cricket, it's all about getting that front foot. And I think with fast bowling, not a lot of players, modern players, know how to play in the back foot. When in the 70s and 80s, when the West Indies at the best, the players who did well, who survived against the West Indies were good back foot players. Lamb, Robin Smith, Steve
Smith.
Towards the end of his career was good with back foot bowling. But normally now with one-day cricket, everyone wants to get in the front foot. No one's, what happens now is because we're not enough players are playing on the back foot. They're leaving the ball. You know what I mean? And that is the whole situation, because because they're leaving the ball, when they do go for the ball, either they're going too early. God bless his soul, Philip Hughes. I mean, Philip Hughes was actually a ferocious cutter of the ball on his day, and he liked to go on the back foot. But when it was at his body, and he was cramped for room, he struggled. So he would leave the ball or go too early, and he lost his life because the Sean Abbott bouncer he just went too early with the ball. He misjudged the pace, and I think that's a lot. You find of a lot of people now is that they're avoiding it because you look at the ball that hits the head. Some of the times they're not going for the shot. They're just trying to get out of the way of it. Look at what happened with Stephen Smith with Archer. He was trying to get out of the way, but you know what I mean. And I think that's the thing. Modern players need to go back to basics and learn to play off that back foot.
Absolutely.
And learn that. Because if you learn how to play the back foot, you'll be a better hooker of the ball and a better puller of the short pitch ball. You know what I mean?
Oh yes.
Because nowadays when the ball's short, they tend to be doing it off the front. Tend to either pull or cut off when they're in the front foot, but they don't know how to do it off the back foot. And I think that's an art.
Absolutely.
But it was a necessity when the West Indies were at their pomp, and obviously when Wacker and Wazim were at their pomp as well. And obviously when you had players like bowlers like Tate, Brett Lee, and obviously Actor as well, who you know what I mean. You had to look. Now. So does one day does the white ball cricket mess up your technique at Test cricket? Well, yeah, with Bazball, it's even going to mess up your technique even more.
Oh yeah, and with an Indian connection, of course, people talk about how the Indian team are effectively tigers when it comes to limited overs cricket. They absolutely despise the short ball as well. So if you ever come up against an Indian,
1976, they declared against the West Indies in '76 the Indian cricket team because they just couldn't cope with the short ball.
Oh yeah, of course. Sunil Gavaskar was one glorious exception to the rule. Sachin Tendulkar also was a very complete batsman. I absolutely enjoyed watching the likes of Rahul Dravid and Lakshman Venkateswamy, and several of those. If you are technically correct, as you say, if you can play all of the shots and you know how to apply yourself, you can definitely counter the short stuff. But I guess you could say that it's a question of limited overs cricket now taking preference. People seem to want to play that way. I really think it's time that, as you say, batting coaches need to start focusing a lot more on playing the old-fashioned way. So I'm not necessarily saying too defensive, but just getting back to the basics and making sure the batsman can play all the shots. And I'm sure we remember the likes of Atherton and Stewart and even Trescothic. They were also pretty good back foot players as well, so they could handle a lot of that short stuff.
You look at Atherton, obviously he's a 90s player, but he started in the 80s. He would have played against those West Indian teams, and you know what I mean. And Scothic as well. Obviously he had probably put South Africa had bowlers like Alan Donald, isn't it? It was very, very quick. Like where it was players like Sean Pollock and Ntini were more skid. Sean Pollock was a fast medium, and Ntini was quick, but he was skiddy.
Yeah.
But in terms of his skiddiness, he got his wickets where he bowled side on, and batsmen were stuck in their crease. But Donald hurried up his batsmen. You know what I mean? And I think that's the thing. The art of fast dealing with fast bowling's changed a bit because what happens now? They've got big bats, and they can negate it because there could be a simple reason is that it's hand-eye coordination. But they're playing fast bowl. They're trying to play fast bowling off the front foot when good fast bowling. You can't do that. So basically, what I'm trying to say, are there any good fast bowlers out there at the moment?
Yeah, sort of mirroring this question from Mystic Werewolf, does Australia have any spinners? Well, there is one, Todd Murphy, but the problem is, I don't even know if...
Mitch Swepson as well.
Oh yeah, I think one video's been sort of doing the rounds on Instagram with the county championship account. The turn that he was able to get one batsman out was absolutely beautiful. But this also segues into our next topic, and we're going to talk about the possible 11 that Australia will field. Now, we were talking, and you pretty much hit the nail on the head that. By the way, people, Hanno's laptop has died, so he's just given his prediction for the Australian 11. But you hit the nail on the head when you said that Australia could ill afford to leave out Todd Murphy,
Oh,
and it
he
sort of
has to
proved.
play. He has to
Yeah,
play.
he has to.
Obviously, there's question marks about Mitchell Stark. Because remember, Mitchell Stark injured his shoulder and he's got a knee problem
Yeah,
as well. And you've got to think about his workload as well because he's played. He's
absolutely.
played. You think about it. He's played 3 test matches in quick succession because we only had a break from a 9-day break. But in essence, he won't be able to play. He won't be able to play the next test. But again, Scott Boland should have been the next cabinet rank, but his confidence he's been written off and been denigrated by everyone in Australia. They all, to the extent he probably won't play. So the next cabinet rank is probably going to be Michael Nisa because obviously he's available. And he has he did play 4 years ago against England. Sorry, in the last Ashes series against England and Australia. So he'll be chomping a bit. So it could be him playing. In terms of like, does Marsh play? There's talk that Green will miss out because the simple reason that Marsh has offered them more of the bat. But again, he didn't bowl much, did he? At Old Trafford, was there? I don't know if there was a bit of an injury there, but he's batting, and the positivity is batting. It may help him where Green's been hit and miss. But the thing with Green, he gives Australia that he can give Australia at least 15 overs a day.
Absolutely, and I think So we've got Hanno's prediction for the 11 right now. Obviously, Khawaja and Warner will stay as the opening combination because there is no one else. Marnus has kept his place in the team with that fine century. Smith still has to be there. Head and Marsh, and I think he's also echoed your sentiment that maybe Green might miss out. So it's Head and Marsh, and then Carey, the wicketkeeper, followed by Cummins, Boland, Murphy, and Hazelwood. So he's also preparing for the possibility of Mitchell Stark missing out, and of course Todd Murphy coming back in. An interesting selection, but you also have to take a look at Cummins as well. It wasn't also so much that his field placings were awful. I think a lot of people were saying that when he was bowling, his bowling was a lot slower at about 130 kilometers an hour. You also have to sort of question, can he really handle that sort of a workload now? Because,
See, that's a very good question because he looked completely knackered. He looks knackered. And I'm not talking mentally, physically he looks knackered. But as a captain, he's got to play all those 6 tests. So but the Australians, if there's a will, if there's a way, the last time Australia came here, the series is more spaced out. But again, it's that 100 test series, that 100 competition, which the Sky TV predominantly the BBC is killing the workload of players. But again, it's a money spinner. The 100, it's their baby, but it hasn't helped Australia. But for Australians, will complain about it after they lick their wounds. But they've all intents retain the Ashes. But I look at his team and I see, everything's agreement. But it's in it. I think I don't know the way people are talking in Australia. They're saying Boland is finished on his tour, so maybe it's Boland. Nisa over Boland, but I say it once, say it 1,000 times. If you're not going to give Scott Boland attacking fields, then you can't play him. You're killing him.
Exactly. Maybe Cummins should take a rest. Smith should captain. Put Green back in the team. Green and Boland there with Smith's attacking field. Maybe things will work, but I really don't know. And
the thing with Nisa moves the ball though. Nisa kind of moves the ball. He does get the odd bit the ball to swing, whilst like whilst bowling holds up an end, but he's got excellent seam movement, excellent off the seam. And he's very good wobble seam as well, but he bowls that line and length, and he can bowl over. He can bowl mid 80s, high 80s as well. So, but again, if he's getting the attacking fields, these bowlers are not these batsmen won't be coming out of crease. They'll try it, but it won't work. That's why I can see why he's the next cab of rank, and he's had a very, very good start of Test cricket. But on this tour, his captain has killed him with the fields.
Yeah, exactly. And this is probably going to be an example of how, it's really do or die when it comes to Cummins and Boland. Does Cummins now, decide to rest with the, the main aim, retaining the Ashes already done, or does he end up playing? There are going to be a lot of permutations over here, and I think Australia might end up sweating over the fitness of Mitchell Starc because, in as much as Cummins has bowled well,
don't touch him, don't play him. You play him, he's going to break down you. If I'm as England fan, I hope he plays because I know he's not going to be effective. He hasn't. He's got these injuries, yet the Test match effectively ended on Sunday. We come up. He's only had 4 days rest. If he thinks he's going to be able to bowl fast and bowl the long spells that Cummins is going to bowl him, then he's mistaken. But again, I see where he's coming from. With the criticisms I'm making of Cummins' captaincy, and I know there's criticism in Australia. If Cummins doesn't win the series and it's 2-2, yes, he's got the Ashes, but there's always going to be that a lot of people are going to think, well, hang on here. Cummins' captaincy has actually cost Australia a series win.
Yeah,
that's the big one. That you had Darren Berry, like I said, the ex South Australia coach. Obviously, he works closely with Shane Warne, Victorian. He thinks that Cummins is going to retire resign the captaincy because he can't cope with the workload. And you've got the likes of Ian Chappell not being too impressed, and Ricky Ponting has labelled his displeasure. And let's not forget, Mark Wall was very vocal as well this week regarding Cummins' captaincy and his field placings. So the pressure on Cummins is going to be immense. And if he thinks that he's going to go back to Australia without criticism ringing in his ears if they don't win a series, then he's mistaken. I can tell you now.
Yep.
He'll get a lot of questions when he gets back to Sydney Airport if they don't win the series.
I get that. It happened to Tim Payne not too long ago, and it could happen to Pat Cummins. But so there will be a lot of tough decisions to be made. And of course, speaking of bowling, one person who will not be bowling, as confirmed by the England management, is the England captain Ben Stokes, which leads us to our final topic. England are, of course, fielding an unchanged 11, which means that not only will Stokes not be bowling, but Anderson will also get potentially a final Ashes test. And there is perhaps some sense in sort of going unchanged in a way, because you can't just suddenly drop Anderson given his knowledge of the conditions. Hopefully at the Oval, things will be to his liking. When I think of the Oval, I'm sort of reminded of that wonderful test between England and South Africa in 2003. That series, of course, which effectively was Michael Vaughan's first series as England Test captain. England made the inspired decision to bring back Martin Paul Bicknell to the side. He had played only 2 tests. I
was at the last day. Me and the wife were at the last day of of that match against South Africa because it was reduced prices at the Oval. We had a choice of whether she said we either go Brighton or go to the last day of the 5th day of the Test match against England and South Africa, and because. So basically, we watched the 5th test. England won, and then we went and watched that ridiculous man and David Blaine being suspended on the London Eye. So that's the memory of 20 years ago. But yeah, Bicknell did he actually, all intents and purposes, he did very well.
He did. He could have had a hat trick, I believe, in South Africa's second innings. And of course, when he came in for the last two tests, mind you, he was sort of expected to be that horses for courses pick. He wasn't even expected to play for England again after only playing those two tests where he performed decently well, but wasn't really given the chance. And England ended up picking the likes of Martin McCaig, among other bowlers, over him. So you can imagine how angry he was.
What about James Patterson's brother as well when they picked
Darren.
him? Oh,
that came after Bicknell, so don't worry about that. I mean, but there was a reason why. There was a reason why Matthew Hoggard couldn't have been picked for Headingley, and we'll discuss that another day. But coming back to Bicknell, the reason why I talk about him is because, having played for Surrey, of course, throughout his entire career, he knew the oval pitch like the back of his hand, obviously. And so what he led to the team, obviously, was 6'4", also could bring the ball down from a height. He also knew how to bowl a really tight off-stump line, and he also could possibly swing it a little bit. But he was the perfect bowler for those sort of conditions at both Headingley and the Oval in that series against South Africa. So that's probably another reason why when it comes to a horses for courses pick, you can't just really drop Jimmy Anderson, especially if he's bowled at the Oval far too many times.
Yeah,
and of course, with the
I say Jimmy's record at the Oval is one of his worst performing grounds, the Oval.
Yeah,
but that, I don't know whether it's superstition or not. But if you talk about Jimmy won't retire. He's waiting to be retired. If you retired, so he's waiting for the tap on the shoulder. But the litmus test for Jimmy is whether is India, isn't it? Because traditionally England don't only take one of them; they don't take both of them to India to away Test series. The only time they took them both to away Test series is the Ashes, but but let's not forget that they didn't take any of them to West Indies in 2022. I know only one of them went to Pakistan.
A surprising call that in many ways, but so what I was trying to say about that is, like, obviously with England going with an unchanged 11, they want to make sure they keep that momentum from Headingley and Old Trafford. It was, of course, unfortunate that Ollie Robinson, who did quite well at Headingley, had to miss out, and Anderson had to come back in. But I suppose with that combination, it might perhaps work a bit. Now, we were talking about Anderson, whether or not Anderson gets the new ball. To me, I actually think that he could perhaps come in at first change now, because whenever he's got the new ball, what happened there?
No, the reason why reason why I went is not because of the ping, is that you're talking about Anderson not getting a new ball. Oh, that's a bit of a swear word, isn't it, in English cricket? Anderson not getting a new ball.
I had mentioned it earlier, though, and the reason why is because, look, he has been economical, and yes, we can say the pitches haven't helped him. And you've also sort of brought up that point when you say that the Oval has not really been very kind to him. But again, when you have someone who has bowled at these grounds so many times, you don't just take away the knowledge. Of course, if we did have a Surrey-based fast bowler who knew the Oval well, it would be wonderful. But sadly, we don't have a Martin Bicknell anymore. But with the unchanged team and the fact that Stokes won't be bowling, obviously Stokes not bowling in this match will be the right call because of the knee. He might have to have surgery on that knee. A call will be taken. So a lot will depend.
Would it be all right for India? Would he be able to play in India?
I hope so. And in that particular case, I really don't know if he'll be able to come out of ODI retirement to join the England squad for the World Cup. And there is, of course, an article on Cricinfo which talks about this. He says he's got to try and get it sorted. And obviously, after the Ashes, he will have to think about it. Of course, after the Oval, they're not going to play another Test series until January 2024. That is, of course, the India tour. So that should, in theory, be enough time for him to have the surgery done as quickly as possible and then go through a period of rehabilitation. But if he's not going to bowl, then obviously it will rest on the attack. And It will be a tough call. I don't know if Anderson will be given the new ball, but if he is, hopefully he might end up breaking his oval duck and end up doing quite well. So, what
Hope
would
so.
be your bowling attack? Who would you like to see take the new ball? Who would you like to see come in as first or second change?
I like to see Stuart. I like to see Anderson Broad with the new ball. And first change would be Mark Wood and for the pace, and obviously Wokes, because I like to see Wokes and Wood used in shorter spells, because I think that both of them Wood obviously for injury rise, I don't want him over bowled because he'll lose effectiveness and he won't be able. We've seen that a lot of times with a lot of bowlers. I think we could argue that Jofra Archer was over bowled, and that's why he's lost a bit of effectiveness. And he's effectiveness, and he hasn't been playing Test cricket for a while. But in terms of Wokes as well, I would like him to be used in short spells as well. I don't really think Wokes and Wood are for me a new ball bowlers. So in order to sort of put pressure on the Australians, I do think that Anderson and Broad should be opening the bowling, especially with David Warner, because don't get me wrong, David Warner will try and get on the front foot and look to get in front, but I just think that Broad and Anderson will do have a bit of his number. And I know, like, if you look at Khawaja as well, Khawaja is someone who sometimes, if you can get him on that back foot and cram up, you might be able to get a wicket. I think the bowlers to actually put pressure on the openers would be Broad and Anderson, and then you bring Mark Wood into the side, and then you bring in Wokes. But I think it's nailed on. They haven't disgraced themselves, Broad and Anderson, and they've served England well, and they have given the platform. They may not get wickets like Jimmy, but the pressure's on. And then when you put the Aussies openers under pressure, they're going to look to probably take more risks with the change bowlers. But one of the things that England need to do is pressure. But again, it's about winning the toss, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whoever wins the toss, I think whoever wins the toss, I know the theme nowadays in modern cricket is to bowl first. Everyone wants to chase. Everyone wants to chase big titles. You know what I mean? So don't be surprised if Stokes wins. He puts Australia at the bat again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if he wins, mind you, that will be his 5th win out of 5 for the entire series.
I can tell you now, for something for nothing, if Cummins wins the toss, he would go at the bat. He will bat. I can tell you that now. He will say, "Oh yeah, I would have done the same thing over bowl." No, you wouldn't, Pat. No, you wouldn't, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things he said, I mean, like, I remember at Headingley, he said, I would have bowled first too, but it doesn't really affect the team that much. Those words, I think I said it last week, would come back to really haunt him. And of course, finally, before we wrap up, we spoke about Moeen Ali coming in at number 3. You thought he'd be a walking wicket, but he actually did a pretty decent job at Old Trafford. So Ali at 3, I think Root at 4 and Brook at number 5. Sounds a bit unorthodox to me, but it's proved effective. Would you be happy with that order?
Yeah, I am happy with that order, because the simple reason is that Joe Root plays his best cricket at number 4. He will bat number 3 if it helps the team, but you don't want Joe Root coming at number 3. And Ali's put his hand up, and let's face it, and he's confident. He's shown a lot of confidence. He goes after the bowling, so it does help. But ultimately, moving forward, England do have to try and find a number 3. Either
that they do,
or what will happen, they'll have to find a new opener and probably move Duckett or Crawley to 3, and then try and find someone who could like put opposition under pressure from an opening stance. But that number 3 position, when Ali, after the Ashes, because Ali will probably go back into retirement anyway, it will be an issue. Joe Root can't bat at number, doesn't want to bat at number 3, wants to bat at 4. So don't be surprised if Duckett or Crawley bat at 3, and then we have to find another opener.
I would actually. Yeah, moving forward. I mean, and the problem is, opening batsmen, of course, as we're discussing, are almost hard to come by. One batsman I do really like, who just doesn't seem to be getting a chance these days, despite scoring heavily in county cricket, is Keaton Jennings, whose father, of course, is the South African wicketkeeper.
He was saying about Keaton Jennings. Keaton Jennings, I don't know, man, because a lot of people. Bob Willis went up to Keaton Jennings, didn't he? And so did Kevin Peterson, but Kevin Peterson. They both think he can't bat. But again, Keaton Jennings, he's had a few chances. If his technique, if he's playing attacking cricket, then I don't see any reason why he can't get his place back. But there's a lot of ridicule in cricket about Keaton Jennings because of the way he finds himself. He finds ways to get himself out for not many runs, but. You're right. He's doing really well for Lancashire.
Yeah, and of course he was brought back into the squad along with Crawley and Duckett. Just wasn't given the chance because, I mean, if memory serves me right, he was in the squad when they went to Dubai for the training camp. He's actually done really well when it comes to playing in Asian and subcontinental conditions. So he should at least.
You could play him alongside. You could play him him and Crawley and put Duckett at 3 because Duckett is an attacking batsman.
Yeah. So you've got that left-right combination at the top.
We can forget about Hamid. Yeah. Hamid is not will not be playing Test cricket under this regime. No way.
Yeah.
Or Burns.
Yeah. Yep. So it's sad to say, I think a few players' careers have already been pretty much decided anyway. But we are going to wrap it up right now. And all I can say, Kenny, is thank you very much again. It's an absolute joy to have you come on these streams. I know that they're normally slated to be for about an hour or so, but whenever we talk, we really go long and long. And I hope the people in the comments in the chat appreciate that. And once again, sir, we put you in the spotlight. Do please tell us where we can find you.
You can find me at KerryKen1972 on Instagram primarily, although I do Twitter occasionally, but that's only to answer a comment. I don't post much on Twitter, except for maybe odd boxing news, but primarily it's going to be on Instagram. And I will be commenting on this last test match. I will be giving my views on both the captaincies for Australia and England, primarily Australia, and also I may change my mind about the 100 and might watch a few matches. But I still believe that 2020 and white ball cricket is not what I call the way the game should be played. But I do understand where the money is. But you think about it, white ball cricket has killed test playing mates to the extent that they're not getting the crowds they deserve for the tests.
Exactly. And not only has it killed players' techniques, it's killed a lot of revenues for test matches. There was a time when, English cricket was considered to be in a bit of a crisis because the test match revenues there was some doubt over them because we were doing so poorly. Now, at least to some extent, things have improved. But obviously, we've got the test starting. The final test of what has been a very engrossing series. And Hanno's given his prediction. He predicts England to win by 3 to 4 wickets or 30 to 50 runs. And that's not too bad a prediction because Australia do have quite a few.
Very good prediction. But one thing is, Cummins will be in a dock when he gets back to Australia. I can tell you now, he'll be in a dock. The Australians are not talking about drawing a series of keeping the Ashes. They kept the Ashes because of what they'd done a year and a half ago, not what they'd done in England, and that won't be lost on a lot of people in Australia. Let's not forget, Australia since 2005, since 2001, with the exception of 2013, the Australians have always believed they're favourites to win the Ashes. And they haven't done it. So there will be a criticism of Cummins if he does not win the series.
Yeah. And what's probably good about Hanno's prediction as well is that, if Stark ends up not being fit, then that pretty much takes away a lot of the sting out of the Australian attack. So Murphy has to come back in, and Cummins now has no other option but to trust his spinner. He's lost Nathan Lyon, his best spinner, his trusted lieutenant, and, Murphy's going to have to be given that faith. And I'm also now more confident of an England win, which means another drawn series. It's not the series win that England would like, but hey, at least we've shown that we are not mugs. We can somehow compete, and we may not be better than Australia, but there is a very small gap between us and them. So thank you very much again to you for joining in, Kenny. Thanks a lot to Hanno for hosting this. I'm sorry his laptop's died. Thanks to every one of you who's joined in the chat and made this video and the channel what it is. I see Luke's just come in. Yep, very crucial that we level the series and stop them claiming a first series win in England since 2001. And you're not a fan of the one-day stuff yourself. Completely would agree. The only problem is, it seems to be dominating these days, but that's pretty much how we go about it. But once again, thanks to everyone involved, and we will be looking forward to catching up with each other once again when the series is done and dusted. There will be a lot more cricket to be discussed in the near future. But until then, enjoy the rest of the sporting action, enjoy the football. And one quick question to you, Kenny, Arsenal this time. Surely you're not staying up to watch the Arsenal-Barca match, are you?
No.
Waste of your time, waste of your money. Don't even think about it.
But one thing I would say is that every game we're playing should be taken seriously. The reason why I say it should be taken seriously is because of the fact that we haven't won the league from the last game of the season against Wolverhampton. Every game is geared towards winning the league next season. Anything less than the trophy is going to be catastrophic, and there will be calls for Arteta to be removed. Yep,
and I think you and I can agree that he will live and die by the Kai Havertz transfer.
Yes, 100%.
Absolutely. Thanks once again, Kenny. Thanks to everyone who's joined in. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the rest of the sporting action. Enjoy the rest of your week. Don't do anything that Kenny, Hanno, and I wouldn't do. But for now, we bid you adieu.
See ya. All right, mate. I've got to go.